But our goal as a digital infrastructure industry is to make power not the bottleneck. It's going to take some work to do that. It's a fairly significant investment in infrastructure in order to make that happen. And I think everyone is kind of the opinion, when you think about it, the thing that generates the most of that, especially in a kind of environmentally conscious way, is nuclear. Bringing that as you get to not just the mega kind of 1 gigawatt Westinghouse kind of deployments, but these kind of small modular reactors and microreactors, which give you the ability to really deploy digital infrastructure and any large power generating infrastructure anywhere, and not allowing power to be the determining factor. Right now you see an entire cottage industry, which is powered land or land adjacent to existing power generation facilities. The more work that's done with nuclear to try to get to the point where you create modularity with that technology, I think the better served kind of digital infrastructure will be to be placed not where the power is, but where it's most needed.
Just because the facts are A, if the narrative is B and everyone believes the narrative, then B is what matters. But it's our job in our industry to speak up proudly, soberly, and to engage people in this dialogue. Those 2.5 billion people that are in energy poverty, they need us.
America cannot meet this threat alone.
If there is a single country,
of course, the world cannot meet it without America,
that is willing to
we're going to need you, the next generation, to finish the
overhaul
job.
nuclear regulation
We need scientists to design new
and
fuels.
focus on net public
We
benefit
need engineers to invent new technologies. We
over absurd levels of radiation
need
protection,
entrepreneurs to sell those
then
technologies.
we will march towards this.
We need workers to operate assembly lines that hum with high-tech,
We
zero-carbon
have
components.
unlimited prosperity for all humans.
We need diplomats and businessmen and women and Peace Corps volunteers to help developing nations skip past the dirty phase of development and transition to sustainable sources of energy. In other words, we need you.
No. Oh shit, we're live!
Oh shit! Yeah. Okay, welcome to another episode of the Fire to Fission podcast, where we talk about energy-dense fuels and how they can better human lives, like making electricity cheaper for data centers, right? Today, I'm joined by Phillip Koblence and Brian Smith. Phillip is with NYI, a data center and co-location group. He's co-founder, and then Brian Smith, director of nuclear reactor development at INL. Brian, Phillip, how you guys doing?
Doing great, thank you.
I'm trying to address you guys by
Yeah.
name for folks that are just listening.
No, just say, can the bald guy answer?
Yeah, right. So for those that aren't aware, they're both bald, and I'm going bald. So, it's just a short time behind you guys.
Yeah,
so.
It does not look that short. It looks like you're trying to be
Right.
I'm trying really hard. I gotta turn sideways.
These are East Coast hairlines. You have more of a mountain range.
If that's going bald, then I was going bald in the best of my teenage years, so
Right.
I'm not sure.
Clearly my chest is also going bald.
Nice. I love it. Cool. Well, Brian, Phillip, took us a while to get this on the calendar, but really excited to chat with you guys. So,
and for anybody wondering why that is, it's because Brian is super, super busy.
yeah, I don't think Phillip rescheduled once. He's
No, I'm just always available. I'm just sitting
Sorry to do
tethered to
that.
my chair.
Cool. Let's start with Phillip. Phillip, do you want to give a quick background for the audience? Kind of set the scene. Who are you? What do you work on? What kind of things do you do?
Let me get my box of tissues. It all started in 1978 with a dream. So I am an OG in the data center world in the New York metro area. So I started a company called NYI, New York Internet, in 1996 as a 17-year-old, really because it was the coming of age of the internet, and I was fascinated by the really communication capabilities of the internet and how connected it made the world. And as a result of that, my brother and I, crazies that we are, decided to jump feet first into whatever that was. That included things like web development, systems integration, getting people online, reselling dial-up and eventually DSL and T1 services and things like that, and doing all things internet, which has evolved to, we operate 5 floors within 60 Hudson Street. focused primarily on interconnection, taking legacy facilities, making them relevant in today's kind of AI hype cycle. And given the fact that we started in '96, we've seen like the ups and downs of everything from the .com burst to the cloud migration, and now the cloud repatriation, and now this AI boom, and then eventually which is really more focused on large language models, which will eventually bring things back to major cities with the inferencing revolution, which will be like, let's call it AI 2.0, and then quantum, and then all of those things. So thankfully, at this point, any hair I lose, I want to lose. And that's what brings us to your lovely podcast this morning. So all of that to say is,
Nice.
my name is Phil. Great to meet you, Mark.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. The Hudson Street, that's a building, middle of Manhattan, no windows.
That is a building.
yeah.
No, it's got plenty of windows. It is a historical building. It was originally the headquarters for Western Union, built in the late 20s. And as a result of having, all of those tubes to feed the horse-drawn carriages with the telegrams and whatever it is Western Union was doing to deliver their messages, eventually the phone companies came in there, started putting copper into those tubes, and it just de facto became this hub of connectivity. And it's evolved over time to be, we call it the most interconnected building in New York, which is for sure, but probably the most interconnected building in the country. Every city has its version of 60 Hudson Street. Chicago has 350 Cermak. LA has 1 Wilshire Street. There's the Westin Building in Seattle. So there are these buildings that just over time, by virtue of certain characteristics of the buildings, just made them where connectivity companies tended to aggregate. And 60 Hudson is one of those buildings.
Awesome. Fantastic background. Thanks. Brian, yeah. Who are you?
Well, Brian Smith, the other bald guy.
Is that your
here.
real name? There's no way that's your real name. Come on.
It's just
Like the
easier,
most
right?
generic.
Yeah, my name is John
yeah.
Doe, and I work for the government. And I'm here
I
to help.
promise. Trust me.
Funny enough, there's another he's a brilliant person that works for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission named Brian Smith. So for a while, when I was still with the federal government, every once in a while, sometimes people would mix us up and we'd get each other's email. But that's happened through my career. So Brian Smith today with Idaho National Laboratory. Part of one of the 17 national labs in this country, which is maybe something we could talk a little bit more about for those who for the uninitiated, those who don't know what the national laboratory system is. It's just a super cool network, very unique in for the United States, in the world in terms of capability for cutting edge research, development, demonstration across just the whole spectrum of science. Very cool place. Anyway, I'm a longtime Fed. I started my career in the federal government in the U.S. Navy. Active duty and reserve. In fact, I'll retire from my Navy career on January 1st. And interestingly, I got my retirement orders today. Very happy about that. So bringing an end to my.
Congratulations.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
I
Thank
think
you.
I see a little tear forming. Is there a tear forming? Oh, we're going to miss you too, Brian. Thank you for your service.
It's been a great career. It is it's effectively what got me into nuclear, though. I was assigned while still on active duty, I was assigned to the U.S. Navy Nuclear Propulsion Program, headquartered in Washington, D.C. And that was a 5-year assignment. The Navy taught me to spell nuclear. And rather than taking orders and staying on active duty beyond that assignment, I decided to stick around. That's when I transitioned to the reserves and became a civilian in that program, and did a lot of different things in that program. Ended up moving into the kind of leadership ranks in that program. I from there moved on to the National Nuclear Security Administration, or kind of broadened my defense nuclear horizon to include weapons and nuclear nonproliferation. And from there, went over to the House of Representatives. I was on the professional staff in the Appropriations Committee as the appropriator for the Department of Energy to all of its nuclear programs, both defense and non-defense, and then some other cats and dogs: the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board, Nuclear Waste Technical Review Board, a few other things. That was a good time on the Hill. When I left there, I went back to the Department of Energy in the Office of Nuclear Energy. That's the part of Department of Energy that does all of the non-defense or commercial nuclear stuff. My last role there, I was acting as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Reactors. So kind of had purview over all of those programs that are seeking to advance nuclear deployments around the country. A lot of things you read about in the paper, right? Or those public-private partnerships that we were doing in the federal government. That was kind of part of my portfolio.
What the
And
hell is a paper?
last
Sorry.
January, I retired from DOE and joined Idaho National Laboratory. Kind of a short leap in as far as the national labs are owned by the Department of Energy, operated by contractors. So the Office of Nuclear Energy owns Idaho National Laboratory, or kind of owns the work portfolio. It's the primary customer of the laboratory. And so by making that leap, it was really a very short leap, given that I was already very familiar with programs being done at the laboratory. So it's been fun now for nearly a year since joining the lab. Just really enjoying keeping this going. And I guess the last comment I'll make, relative to working with Phil here, which has been great. The data center industry, the stuff that Philip's doing to deploy AI, at scale, which is kind of what's on my mind. This stuff has to be powered, and so over the last few years, I started leaning into the data center industry as one of the key market catalysts that we needed in nuclear. To go deploy those reactors, I wanted to look for something beyond just a standard utility, purchase, own and operate model for nuclear. Let's find those other off takers. And the debut of ChatGPT, frankly, in November of 2022 was something that was kind of a seminal moment. Those load growth projections shot up, and that told me that was an opportunity for nuclear. And sure enough, the marriage is what it is, and here we are to talk about it.
Can we agree, just as an audience, that number one, this would be a fantastic podcast to have a drinking game with the word nuclear on. Number two,
and data centers,
data centers, but really nuclear. I mean, just in terms of Brian's initial introduction, and Brian Smith is just far more credible and capable than I am with that introduction.
Than both of us.
That's right.
Yeah. I don't understand how you retire from an organization and then go work for the same organization. Like, what?
That is a mere nuance. It really does get nuanced. The laboratories are owned by the Department of Energy, but operated by contractors. So each laboratory is contracted by the Department of Energy for a team, in INL's case, over 6,000 scientists and engineers, all of whom work for a private entity that is hired to operate the labs. So the DOE owns the land, the DOE owns the equipment, the microscopes, the hot cells, the glove boxes, but they hire a private company of people to go and operate it. So I merely joined that contractor workforce.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, I mean, Brian, you alluded to it a little bit, but why are we talking together between Brian and Phil? This all came together.
Yeah, maybe I'll be short, and Phil, I'll turn to you. Because I did. You're right. I already kind of alluded to it. The I'll say the AI race, but I tend not to use that word because I'm not exactly sure. A race by definition has a finish line, right? And I don't know what the end of the AI race looks like. I don't know how you win it. I know what the space race was about. They planted a flag on the moon. Right. I'm a triathlete. I know what the end of a triathlon looks like, and I'm very glad to see it. But so let's say that it's what we're trying to achieve is dominance in AI in the world, because those who sort of own AI or dominate AI have a special place in the world. And I think as we look across the world landscape and those who would seek to compete with us, Russia and China come to mind. China is doing certainly big things in AI. Much of that work that they're doing in AI is underpinned by their energy ambitions, not least of which is their nuclear ambitions. Today, we, the U.S., produce quite a bit more nuclear energy than China, about twice as much. We put almost 100 gigawatts out there of nuclear energy, about a fifth of what is produced in the U.S. China's about half that, but China's got 33 large reactors under construction right now, and they're going to overtake us in just a few years in terms of nuclear energy production. And so when you consider what a country can achieve when a country dominates the energy landscape, it is that sort of energy race that I'm really interested in. And then all the things that layer on top of that to include the development of very sophisticated AI tools. That's a big deal. It's a big deal for national security. It's a big deal for our well-being as Americans. And that's where I think nuclear kind of fits in.
That was your short answer.
Yeah,
Jeez
yeah.
Louise.
So
Jeez
don't get me
Louise.
going on the long one.
Oh my God! Don't pull that string. Don't pull that string. Look, ultimately, when I started in the data center industry, which is at the beginning of it, it was to operate a 1 megawatt site was thought of to be like that's big. You don't need much more. When would you ever need much more than that for a kind of traditional compute workload in the late 90s, early 2000s? And that was the case really until maybe the cloud came of age and you had these kind of large aggregation of compute farms that AWS put together, certainly in Northern Virginia, and Microsoft with Azure and Google Compute, and you sort of the birth of the hyperscalers. You got to the point where people started talking about 10 or 20 megawatt sites, and I think what AI really did was it shined a light on the fact that the limiting factor with respect to like compute workloads, with respect to how technology is evolving, was no longer space or connectivity, which had been, the big issues of, kind of web 1.0, 2.0, and certain not 3.0. I think 3.0 is where you started getting into cryptocurrency and blockchains and things like that, where the limiting factor started being how much power, particularly how much power density you can achieve at these sites. And that's when we started as an industry making requests of the grids that they could not keep up with. So, when you think of and I want to get into the concept of, the environmental benefits of, kind of green power versus dirty power, because we're at the stage when you're in a race where those are nice to haves, but those are not like the focus of the industry as much as, the industry would like to claim that they are. But once you started talking about power being the bottleneck, then we start having to talk about what the ways of generating vast amounts of power quickly are. And you have the traditional ones, oil, coal, of course, the efficient ones, hydro and wind, and solar. But the ones where you're going to be able to get the most kind of dense capacity are the kind of small modular reactors, the microreactors, and of course, the large kind of nuclear reactor base. But I still think, one of the reasons why I also assume that Brian doesn't want to talk about the word race is because race suggests that, speed is the ultimate a winner. And I think when it comes to nuclear is likely the only answer that's gonna solve the problem. It's just not gonna solve the problem as quickly as I think a lot of folks want to believe initially, until you get to the point where a lot of the things that Brian is developing at INL are starting to be, kind of manufactured quickly. So all of that to say is my name is Phil. Great to meet you guys.
I love it, Phil. So what is going to win that race?
I think the answer is unclear. I mean, my hope is that what wins that race is, the kind of focus on the best underlying use cases for AI, and not just AI for the sake of AI. And I think you're seeing a lot of that. And I think that's the problem with just the kind of the corporate mindset that powers a lot of these companies. I think somewhere in the area of 80+% of our increase in GDP over the last 2 years has been based on the back of these almost, absurdly growing, AI ish companies and hyperscalers that are, kind of building the foundation of where these GPUs get deployed. But I think ultimately what's going to win that race is the best underlying fundamental use case for this technology, which I'm not sure we really see yet. I mean, you have a lot of, kind of data sets and data analysis. I think, the world has moved to the point where we are the data, the edge, if you will, like everybody's household, everyone's person. I'm wearing an Oura ring. I have an Apple Watch on. I am generating data at a crazy pace, and that doesn't even take into account my refrigerator that tells me when I need milk. You're going to need the ability to kind of analyze all of that data. But ultimately, the exciting use cases for me are the ones that are like, cancer screening and early detection and trying to really capture that data and work for the benefit of society. So we can all collectively as a society work smarter, not harder, and focus on some of the fundamental areas of our kind of socioeconomic condition that are not just tied to doing repeatable things over and over again and trying to figure out what makes kind of the economy, number of people. I'm not running for office, by the way, so I want to I don't want to turn this into a Bernie Sanders rally.
I don't think anyone on this call is running for office. Yeah. I don't know. Brian's got this politician smile.
I don't know if you guys can. Yeah. I don't know if you guys seen this. He's got many diplomas on his wall.
Yeah. Yeah. So race is not maybe the right framing of it, but the whole world, I'll put this in air quotes, knows that AI needs more power. There's, I think, some nuance around that, but the timing of when nuclear can respond to that, I think is kind of up in the air, right? And I would say even within the nuclear community, a little uncertain.
I think it's only uncertain with those people that are going to lie to you. And Brian's not one of those people.
Yeah. Well, let's double click on it a little bit. Like, what do we think the future could look like with timing for new reactors coming online? And then, I mean, how much of this AI demand could they meet?
Yeah. Great question. And I'm glad you're opening it up to the timeline piece. I do think that that's a critical thing to talk about, in some ways to level expectations, because, to your point, you could look out there for information. You'll find all kinds of prognostications, a lot of them driven by the industry, the nuclear industry itself. And so I appreciate being able to enter conversations like this and be something of an honest broker, because I don't work for any one of those vendors, and I don't get commissions on sales of reactors. But one thing I want to point out, because some people do ask me when I go around to conferences or I speak on this topic, they say, "Hey, Brian, when will nuclear be real?" Because they're asking about the timeline.
It's
but that's
super
a good
real
chance.
already.
Right,
it's already real. Like,
exactly.
yeah.
We've got 94 reactors operating in this country, producing almost a fifth of the electricity. So it's real. And by the way, there is a lot that we can do and that we are doing to increase the capacity of the existing fleet. That's a process called uprates. We have an existing, there's a program, a fundamental program at Idaho National Laboratory that is specifically designed to provide underpinning research and development that can help the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and industry uprate existing reactors. So if you've got a reactor today operating, so let's say it's putting out 1,000 megawatts, what kind of research can we do to support the case for potentially a license amendment that allows that reactor to produce 1,100 megawatts? That's a real thing that has occurred for decades. As we sharpen the pencils, we figure out that there are ways to do that. There are also new types of fuel that we can test at Idaho National Laboratory and then can get deployed to the fleet. to make the fleet operate in a more efficient manner at a higher capacity. So that's important. Uprates remain important. We have a plan right now this decade to add gigawatts of power within the existing fleet. That's without building one single new reactor. So good news there, to the extent that we're talking about a power demand filling a gap measured in gigawatts. So I just want to highlight that piece. Restarts is another one, though, right? We do have a handful of reactors that were shut down recently. They were shut down in a way, we don't have to go into the technical details, but they were shut down in a way that makes it fairly straightforward to put fuel back in them and turn them back on. So that's good news, because that can quickly bring, again, for each large reactor representing something like about a gigawatt on the grid. That's good news, because you can just refuel, say, 3 Mile Island, the TMI Unit 1 that was shut down in 2019 merely for economic reasons. When Microsoft comes along as a partner, again, kind of that post-AI, post-Chat GPT coming out, you've got these hyperscalers with deep pockets out there just looking for power. TMI shut down in 2019 for economic reasons. Constellation decided it just wasn't economically viable to remain as an operating asset. It's got a lot of years, it's got decades left to go, but if it's not economically viable, so be it. Microsoft comes along, changes that equation. We're going to turn back on TMI-1. It's the Crane Clean Energy Center. That's good news. That's going to put another gig plus on the grid. Palisade, same thing. Duane Arnold, same thing. So that's exciting stuff. That's all large-scale reactors and things that are happening near term. So yeah, nuclear is real, and nuclear continues to get even more exciting with what we've already got. As far as SMRs and micros, we're in an exciting time this decade at Idaho National Laboratory and in some other spots around the country. There are small modular reactors and microreactors. You could kind of group those in. Let's call them advanced reactors that are going to start turning on their demonstrations or their pilots, that first reactor. Several of them at Idaho National Lab, but there's one by X Energy down in Texas. There's one by TerraPower out in Wyoming. Kairos is an exciting company to turn on their reactor in Tennessee. So, it's not exclusive to Idaho National Laboratory, even though we're partnering with virtually all of those developers. But they all have plans to turn on reactors. We're citing at INL Oklo, ALO, Antares, Radiant is putting their microreactor demonstration into a test bed that Idaho National Laboratory has. So all of these things that I'm describing, these are all reactors that are going to turn on this decade. That's important. Now, that's not putting a reactor on everybody's coffee table as soon as those first, pilot reactors turn on, but it is a critical step to commercializing. You have to turn on the first one before you can turn on the next 100. And so by partnering with these companies, helping refine their designs, assist them through the NRC licensing process, which is critical for commercial operations, we can de-risk the programs. That can help incentivize investments into those developers so that they can capitalize on turning on the first reactor and quickly move into commercial operations, scaling those deployments.
Gotcha. Phil, were you at the event that INL hosted? I'd be remiss if we didn't mention
I was
that.
not, because Brian must have lost my address when
Brian didn't invite you,
making
personally?
making
That was kind of
invitations.
rude
Yeah,
of
it's
him.
pretty rude. And I was just hoping at least I would be able to grow a third eyeball by seeing what you guys are doing over there. Nothing.
Brian, give us the quick overview of what the event that you guys hosted earlier this year.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Thanks. We had the second data center workshop at INL. We did the first one in October of 2024. Did the second iteration, might have slipped into the first week in November. It's either October, November, but brought together a lot of folks across the data center industry, and not data centers exclusively. A lot of project developers, a couple utilities, just entities interested in this data center building boom. Brought them out to Idaho National Laboratory, did a tour of the site. Mind you, INL, very cool place, lots of history. It's worth Googling it. If you're an American, it's something to be very, very proud of. But it's 890 square miles. So it's a huge place with kind of little fence lines all around the property, doing some really exciting nuclear research, development, and demonstrations. So did a tour of the site, and then did a couple days of discussions. Essentially, a lot of INL researchers coming in and kind of presenting their ongoing research programs that have relevance to the digital infrastructure community. And the goal was to create something of a two-way conversation. Ideally, it wasn't just an INL researcher, herding the heads of the attendees with a whole bunch of technical stuff and then walking out the door. It was more about presenting these ongoing research programs and soliciting input from the data center community on what is it that is of greatest relevance to you? What should we be doing different? What can we be doing in the future that will help accelerate this nexus of AI and nuclear? So I think it was a very productive event. I'm sure we're going to do another one. We're also creating what we're calling a data center playbook, in part to kind of coalesce, to bring together a lot of the lessons learned from these workshops, and also just to put into one place a lot of that ongoing research, something that can be useful to the community at large. So that was the workshop and its goals.
Gotcha. Super helpful. Phil, do you guys just have stuff in New York? Or are you looking at elsewhere? I mean, the New York Internet, right? There's the acronym, but
yeah. I mean, we NYI has stuff in New York and outside Chicago. I as a kind of let's call it data center OG, wear many hats with a couple of different platforms, consulting and otherwise. So I have a couple of different platforms that put me, as kind of a global digital infrastructure, kind of Renaissance man. So to the extent that, I am part of a lot of conversations for the deployments of, hundreds of megawatts of capacity globally, and trying to connect the dots, which is really more about the relationships that I've built over the course of the nearly 30 years that I've been doing this. So less specific to NY and more specific to kind of my own place within the ecosystem, which hopefully will lead me to get an invitation to the 2026 version of Brian's little party that he's not inviting me to.
That's gonna be my follow-up question.
Indeed.
Yeah, you gotta you go out to INL and see what it's all about. So how do you guys know? Did you guys know each other before this call? I guess I seemed transparent from the emails, but how did you guys get connected?
I started I co-founded a foundation called Nomad Futurist, which really the initially it was a podcast which grew into a 501c3 focused on trying to get the next generation excited about looking at digital infrastructure as a potential career path. So not an entry point just in terms of programming or computer engineering, but really trying to kind of integrate digital infrastructure into existing STEAM curricula, because in order to really keep pace with the development of all of these kind of technology platforms, we need people fundamentally to do all the work. We have an industry that is, largely composed of the same folks that were there when I started 30 years ago, and that has not necessarily kept pace with kind of the evolving landscape and how important we are to the other elements of technology. And through that process, we had one of our advisory board members also, worked for a couple of other companies, and Brian, as a kind of nuclear expert, started talking at a number of events that we were speaking at as well. And then when I see anybody that could be a doppelganger, except a slightly better and more accomplished looking doppelganger, then I'm like, Brian, I'm Phil. Can you join me to make me seem smart on various things? And it seems like we've known each other for decades. I think we probably said the first word to each other within the last certainly 10 months.
Yeah.
And then we've seen each other at a number of these events. And he's been trying to get away from me ever since.
Brian, who's the other co-host at the event? I mean, he kind of is also a little doppelganger. Like,
You're thinking of that person that Phil just described. Phil Mark Gustikoff was there.
Yet
Yeah.
another one. Yes, yet another.
right.
And Mark is on the Nomad Futurist Advisory Board as well. So it's we try to make it a safe space for bald middle-aged white men to come together and talk about the future of industry. What could possibly go wrong?
It's fantastic. I love it.
Right.
So, we talk about nuclear, we talk about natural gas on this podcast. Like, how do we see data centers and nuclear getting married? And not married, but working together.
I think from the data center perspective, we need to find the best ways to most efficiently generate a lot of power. So the power element of it is no longer a bottleneck. We'll always have bottlenecks, right? So it was space and connectivity that was the bottleneck. Now it's power that's the bottleneck. Presumably nuclear is one of the ways in which it's not the only way. There are lots of technologies happening, with respect to hydrogen power generation, leveraging natural gas and the existing pipelines, certainly to create bridging power to get a lot of these deployments in place, and a lot of interesting ways to leverage different power, kind of fuel mechanisms to generate the type of power that we need. But our goal as a digital infrastructure industry is to make power not the bottleneck. It's going to take some work to do that. It's a fairly significant investment in infrastructure in order to make that happen. And I think everyone is kind of the opinion, when you think about it, the thing that generates the most of that, especially in a kind of environmentally conscious way, is nuclear. So bringing that, especially as you get to not just the mega kind of 1 gigawatt Westinghouse kind of deployments, but these kind of small modular reactors and microreactors, which give you the ability to really deploy digital infrastructure and any large power generating infrastructure anywhere, and not allowing power to be the determining factor. Right now you see an entire cottage industry which is powered land or land adjacent to existing power generation facilities. The more work that's done with nuclear to try to get to the point where you create modularity with that technology, I think the better served kind of digital infrastructure will be to be placed not where the power is, but where it's most needed. Brian.
Yeah, no, that's all very well said. I would just add, Mark, maybe one exciting waypoint that we're going to see in this journey is a program that the Department of Energy rolled out this year, and the first awards will be made, or selections will be made in January, I expect. This is a program to site data centers on federal lands, co-located with among energy generating advanced energy generating capabilities, co-located with nuclear reactors. And so there's 4 federal sites thus far that have been selected for that program. Idaho National Lab is one of them. The others are environmental management, Department of Energy cleanup site in Kentucky called Paducah, one in Oak Ridge in Tennessee, and then Savannah River out in South Carolina. Idaho National Lab was the first of the 4, so there'll be the first selections made, as I mentioned, just next month. And those selections will identify teams that responded to requests for applications uh, these teams would be data center developers, nuclear reactor developers, and then anyone else that is involved in deploying data center and nuclear projects. And those teams will be selected to go actually build a data center, data centers. I expect there'll be multiple teams. We'll see what Department of Energy selects, but build a data center co-located with the nuclear reactor. And I think that's going to be kind of the first of a wave of data centers co-located with nuclear reactors. And I love the way that Philip mentions it. As much as I tout the importance of large scale nuclear, and we talked about uprates, we talked about restarts, building new large scale reactors. That's a priority right now for the White House. But small modular reactors and microreactors, they still fit into this because there are some exciting siting opportunities, places where you can put those things, maybe where you couldn't fit a large scale AP1000 reactor. So I think you'll see the Department of Energy is going to be looking at some of those smaller reactor sizes under this program to site data centers on federal land. But I think it's going to be the push industry needs to partner with the federal government. The federal government saying we have lots of land. I've mentioned 890 square miles at Idaho National Laboratory. I got a lot of land. So let's build a data center. Let's put a nuclear reactor there. Let's have the federal government as a willing partner, streamlining the environmental permitting process, site characterization, et cetera, everything that you would need to go deploy that project. That's an exciting thing. And again, for your listeners, that's January, I anticipate the Department of Energy making their selections on the Idaho one with those other 3 sites I named to follow in succession. So this train is moving very quickly.
Okay, I've got some follow-up questions on that idea. INL sounds awesome, right? Like, let's just put a nuclear reactor next to a data center. Like, the electricity doesn't have to go as far. It'll just power the data center. But when I was there, part of the discussion was like, okay, but some data centers require high reliability, and new technology is notorious for being somewhat unreliable. So, nuclear, we might have to have this backup power source. Many people have recommended natural gas as a backup power source. There's no natural gas pipeline to the INL site. How then do we provide backup power for nuclear reactors at the site? And if the answer is, well, we can have lower reliability, like what kind of data centers can work intermittently? So, Phil, you might be able to comment a little bit on that.
I can go with the kind of data centers.
What is the product that is using these data centers, right?
Yeah. So if you're talking about the kind of the AI factory type data centers that are essentially these large language model farms for the deployment of, thousands upon thousands of NVIDIA GPUs, whether it's the H100s or B300s or Blackwells or whatever. And that's going to continue to change. That profile is going to change. That power requirement, it sounds like, will continue to increase, where, I come from a generation where, 5 kilowatts in a rack should really be enough. And you have, Jensen Huang at GTC suggesting that 1 megawatt a rack is a realistic expectation, which sounds insane to me. But in reality, those large language model farms do not necessarily have the same kind of super low failure tolerance that, say, a traditional mission critical workload would have. Yes, you want them to be on. Yes, you have a lot of sensitive equipment and you don't want to just necessarily pull the plug on them. So, in I think the range of, let's call it, uptime tolerance for workloads that are within kind of high power data center environment is on the low end of the range. You have a lot of these farms that are now being converted into GPU farms, which are like the crypto mining operations, which had no we would call them a tier 0 from an Uptime Institute rating methodology.
They would just connect anytime.
Right.
Like,
it just you wouldn't even have batteries.
Right.
You wouldn't. It would just connect straight to the utility. Remarkably, it's a similar kind of hardware use cases. There were GPUs that were mining for cryptocurrency. So a lot of those sites, there are companies like Iron that you may have heard of that are using former crypto mining sites that are well suited to convert into AI sites that do require some level of power conditioning, maybe UPSs, so you can maintain some level of organization of power conditioning, etc. But don't necessarily need to have tier 4 2N methodologies that you would have a critical, say, like the Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan data center that is operating, these hospital grade fueling contracts because, the entire financial market requires this infrastructure be up and running. So there is a range, and for the most part, the AI factories are not at the top end of that range. They need more reliability than, say, a crypto mining farm, but I don't necessarily know that they need fault tolerant, concurrent, maintainable kind of power infrastructure. Brian?
And I'm ignorant, Phil. Like, what do you know the breakdown in like total data center power demand? Like, how much of it has to be the super high reliability versus the AI factories?
Yeah, I would suggest that just and I have no actual scientific evidence to support this.
No, actually.
Right? So
is there research?
But if you are, I'm sure there is.
resources?
I'm sure if we went to Infrastructure Masons or we went to IDCA,
let's ask chat.
or just ask, screw that, just ask Phil. Just ask Phil. And Phil is going to tell you that ultimately the mission critical business operations is a fraction of the overall kind of deployment, particularly in this new AI kind of hype cycle element. So I'd say like the vast majority of the workloads that are coming online in the last, let's call it, 2-3 years, that are, 100 megawatts and above, are for these, kind of AI factory large language model deployments that don't have that same tier 4, even tier 3 requirement for concurrent maintainability. And it's still a fraction of the ultimate workloads, certainly in the grand scheme of how much data center power is deployed, which is to say, several hundred megawatts, gigawatt, a low end number of gigawatts of the overall dozens of gigawatts of data center capacity that are deployed, that are those critical workloads that can't go down. But even that has started shifting from a kind of vertical, like this site can't go down methodology, to a horizontal kind of regionally distributed architecture where you're never reliant on one site. If you look at the way Google operates, if Ireland goes down, then it automatically just pivots those workloads to other regions that are up. So you are having a much more horizontal strategy of systems architecture than you had in the past, where one site had to, all eggs in one basket.
The Stargate project, the way it's being deployed in Texas, is kind of an example of that. Is Stargate? It's that's all about AI and learning. Deploying the Crusoe deployment is for 100 megawatt buildings, essentially, to go around a hub. Stargate isn't putting in full redundancy on every 100 megawatt building deployed. They're actually doing generators, 3 megawatts of generators per 100 megawatt deployed. So essentially their view is, if we lose power from the grid, we'll be okay. The learning process essentially pauses. The 3 megawatts of diesel backup, generator backup, is just to kind of keep the core processing, kind of that, remembering where the learning was taking place when it paused. And then when the lights turn back on, everything.
There's your answer. 3%. 3%.
What's that?
There's your answer. 3%.
Mission critical 3% to keep things going. Right?
I'm using Brian's example. Brian Smith, the director of nuclear development at Idaho National Labs, says 3% of digital infrastructure deployments are critical.
But Mark, you asked a good question about so for the INL under this program, Department of Energy is leading. I'm excited to see what kinds of deployments teams are selected by the Department of Energy, because it's not crazy to think that there could be a 50 megawatt deployment that would be grid connected in Idaho, but with a 75 megawatt reactor co-located, probably some diesel generators involved in the mix, some batteries to handle load transients, etc. Right? It doesn't necessarily. I don't. Philip already covered it so well, but I think you could translate all of that to site specific for Idaho and determine why that commercial venture, that commercial data center would fit very well within that INL envelope.
Gotcha. Awesome. Okay. I said earlier, total demand in air quotes, and that was kind of my way of asking or saying, like, how much power is actually needed versus I heard a podcast recently that said that there could be some incentives throughout the industry to, I don't know, use hyperbole and like exaggerate a little bit how much power is needed. Because, like, think about it. If you're a hyperscaler, then and you say there's a power shortage, then like other people could jump in and like start building power to solve your problem for you. Do you guys think that's in play here?
Yes. Wait,
Short
ask
answer,
the question
right?
again. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
it is definitely in play. I mean, I think, I have some experience with ComEd as an example, which is, the provider in Illinois for specifically for the kind of Chicago submarket, and they are under capacity as of, a couple months ago, of their pipeline of committed power that people have actually put money down to secure. They were under capacity by 29 gigawatts. That is an absurd number. And I think even they are working under the assumption that regardless of whether someone paid for it or not, a lot of those workloads are chasing the same underlying customer, and whether those sites are built or not is really up for debate. And I think anytime you have your companies whose valuations, much like, I'm not suggesting we're in a bubble. There is another podcast that I have coming out on Monday where we talk about this with a couple of
What's
people.
the name of it?
The name of that podcast is Cool Vector, and we have Michael Elias from TD Securities, who's like a big analyst, where we talk about whether this is we're in an AI bubble or not. But I think ultimately the one similarity that I can have with the kind of .com bubble is the focus on companies, not necessarily for how profitable they are, but at the pace with which they grow. And anytime you have stock prices that are impacted positively just by saying they have, coming deployments to put online, you see like the going public of CoreWeave and companies of that same ilk. You saw Microsoft actually have a stock market dip when they paused some developments in January, which was broken by Michael Elias, that's going on that podcast. Anytime the fluctuation of a stock price is based on the perception of just deploying for the sake of deploying and not really focused on what is the underlying workload, is there a profitability associated with the pace of this deployment, then you have some, hard to unsee corollaries between like the pets.coms and all of those things that were focused on just grow, get user base at all costs. Amazon didn't make money for the first, 10 years of its operation because it was really just all about getting customers to be part of that ecosystem. And I see some similarities here, and you'd be crazy not to think that some of the demand is manufactured and ultimately will not. I think it will all be absorbed. I think one of the corollaries for the .com boom was there were articles that came out in the Times that said, the internet is a fad. I don't think we're at the level anymore where we think digital infrastructure won't eventually be absorbed. So I think this is a worthwhile investment. But I think just like the dot-com bubble, there are going to be winners and losers, and there are going to be lots of folks that end up, building capacity that isn't absorbed on the same timeline that they're underwriting towards. And I think that's
Well, that's a great segue and great way to frame it, actually. So, like, Phil, you're talking about the demand side of this equation, right? And Brian has direct, I won't say access, but like insight into part of the supply side, which is like new nuclear reactor technology that's getting developed. And what we said, I don't think we explicitly said, but earlier inferred that like these technologies have a long time horizon for their development cycle. And
I think that was inferred by the air quotes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of them, right? Like, I mean, I feel like 2025, there's been several new companies that have materialized and like, we're going to make a nuclear reactor, which is very exciting and I think helpful for the industry. But I'm curious, Brian, on your take about like, could the sector become oversupplied or for relative to demand, and like what does that look like?
Yeah,
how do you think about that supply side technology? Yeah,
it's a great question, and I think right now the count around the world for advanced nuclear companies, somebody in
it's
some way,
like
shape,
over 100, right? Like,
it's like I think 127 is the last count. And so if you asked me, hey, will 127 companies successfully deploy commercially their reactors? I think it's fair to say the answer is no. Certainly, I don't think so. Is there space for multiple? Yeah, I also think there are. There are some different technologies out there. They're all splitting the atom. But high temperature gas reactors come with high temperatures. That heat is very useful beyond just producing power. Right. And so, I mean, that's the demonstration of the X Energy reactor in Texas is in a partnership with Dow Chemical that wants the heat from X Energy's high temperature gas reactor. It's good stuff. I mean, you can use that in steel making. That's good stuff. Now, until we move that type of reactor down the cost curve from those early deployments that occur at a higher cost down to deployments that the market in those other offtake industries would embrace, it's let's just say that's going to take a little bit of time, but that's what we're working on, getting those first deployments made so we can actually start to ride down the cost curve to achieve order books of deployments. So high temperature gas reactors, they kind of have that use case. That's good news. I mean, heck, any of the advanced reactor fleet could be used for its heat. There's a lot of industries out there that just need heat. Desalination operations, right? You can move to very clean desal operations in parts of the world that you'd never really think about. I mean, microreactors using their heat on, the coast in Africa, providing fresh water, like Olympic-sized swimming pools, multiples of them every day of fresh water to communities that don't otherwise have access to fresh water. That's a great use case, right? And so there are a lot of other use cases for advanced nuclear. We have to remain laser focused on the power piece for all the reasons we've just talked about, but we can't lose sight of all of those other exciting use cases that nuclear brings along with it. And again, as Phil said at the top, those SMRs, those micros, those are a lot of those other use cases. Yeah, you're probably not going to build a large scale gigawatt-sized reactor on the coast in Africa to make fresh water for desal operations, but you might do that with a couple of micro reactors that take up as much space as a tennis court, right? So that's good stuff. That's exciting stuff, and I think that's why this is such an exciting place. I
think the way we're looking at it now is we don't measure things in tennis courts. We measure them in pickleball courts. So it's 4 pickleball courts.
Oh man, that's the trend. We just posted some visuals on the Fire Division website that have like nuclear waste and then like some oil and gas waste, but they're on a tennis court, not a pickleball court. But we'll have to update that, right? Like put them on pickleballs. Right. That's wonderful. Brian, I really like that framing. And a great counterpoint of like, hey, electricity isn't the only product that is being offered here. Like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
electricity is a commodity and a service, and like, um, it's an easy solution to use this technology for, but there are other solutions, and if your technology can solve multiple problems inexpensively or cheaper
Yeah.
than competition, then like you stand a chance to win. It's still
Yeah.
competition, but
Yeah.
um okay, guys, we're coming up on our time. This has been fun because I can tell already, like, we're gonna have to have you guys back on either together or separately. Um, but how about parting thoughts? And I'll ask the question, you know, if you had to say by 2030, what has changed? Like, let's say we're having this discussion end of year 2030 instead of 2025. Like, what's changed? What steps have been taken? How has the landscape evolved over those 5 years? So,
My sense will be that I'm not sure we will have made a significant change in the overall complexion from a nuclear perspective. I think a lot of those technologies will have evolved, but I don't think they'll be in large, commercial use at that point in the way that they may in the future. That's not to say, the upscaling of the existing sites, but I'll let Brian touch on that stuff. I think from a data center perspective, I think the thing that I find super unique about this moment is that so much of our planning is based on a spec of a kind of chipset that exists today. And I think the one thing we have recognized over the course of the last 5 years, or even 3 years, there was this quote at the OCP conference in October that the last year has been the most impactful decade in compute in history, was just suggest that things are evolving at such a quick timeline that the idea that a data center that is designed today and deployed today is going to be relevant to the exact use case that we have in 2030 is a misunderstanding of the way, this technology evolution cycle is working. And it's only proving itself to be more rapid. And I think the one thing that the past has shown to us, certainly about compute, is that things tend to, once we solve for the bottleneck, which was operation cycles, which is what these GPUs are doing, we start focusing on how do we create those operation cycles more efficiently from a power perspective. So when you had like spinning disks being the prominent way to store data, you ended up with a fairly rapid evolution to solid state drives because you were able to solve the space limitations that solid state drives had, which created a vast reduction in the amount of power that was used for solid state drives. I see the same thing happening in this kind of compute cycle where if you asked me to look in a crystal ball in 2030, I would say that you have a significant, you refer to it as, kind of overbuilding. I think there is going to be a significant amount of overcapacity available in the market of sites that, are going to only come online in 2028 and 2029 because that's the cycle with which companies are developing now. They have sites that are under development now that are going to be ready for service, RFS, in 2028, 2029, and I think in 2030 it's going to be a completely different landscape for, what sort of power requirements, what sort of deployments, how the kind of large language model experience has shifted towards a more inferencing focused methodology, which is going to move away from some of those large giant campuses in the middle of nowhere and maybe focus back towards the edge, which is still going to require some infrastructure investment in, kind of major population areas, but in kind of a different way. So I don't know if that answers the question, but all of that to say is my name is Phil. Great to meet you.
I think that was excellent. Yeah. Thanks, Bill. How about you, Brian?
Yeah, I think in 2030 we'll have put at least 5 gigawatts more on the grid from the existing fleet of 94 reactors. I think we'll have at least 10 large scale reactors under construction. Now that might be at 4 or 5 sites. So that could be places where we're building anywhere from 2 to 4 reactors, but I think at least 10 total reactors will be large scale reactors will be under construction by 2030. And in 2030, we'll have turned on multiple advanced small reactors starting next year. And that plan is already baked. So in 2030, we'll just be counting just how many of the small demonstration reactors we have turned on. And by 2030, we will have powered a data center using co-located advanced nuclear power generation. Hopefully even more than one. Again, I hope in 2030 we're counting just how many of those we've turned on. Again, and I think it's important to have that caveat, and I think Phil hit on this. That doesn't mean that we're talking about the entire data center industry is powered by nuclear in 2030. But we're hitting those critical milestones this decade and celebrating them in 2030 because they are the key milestones we need to advance into the 2030s with a plan to deploy at scale. And that's why I keep saying it's such an exciting time now. And in 2030, we're just going to be, looking forward to more excitement.
Exciting times. Awesome. Phil, Brian, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Mark.